Vanessa, let's come on to Iran then. And of course, the BBC has been making a huge deal over the last number of weeks about protests and women's rights and these kinds of things. What's actually going on there?
Well, I mean, first of all, yes, Amnesty International, the BBC, the CNN, all the usual suspects are picking up this. Really, it's a tragic story of Masa Amini, a 22-year-old young girl who was taken in by the so-called morality police, although that's a translation that is running in the West. It's not a very accurate one. Um, I think they're better known as the Guidance Patrol or something similar by Iranians. And she effectively collapsed when she was in the waiting room, and she was taken to hospital with apparent heart problems, and she died from that. Of course, the story that is being promulgated is that she was beaten in custody and that she died from the brutality of the so-called morality police. And so, what I wanted to try and do is to reach out to various Iranians, strangely enough, to speak to them about what is going on the ground. This particular young lady, Setareh Sadeqi, who has a PhD in American Studies from the University of Tehran. She's a researcher, a political analyst, a women's rights activist inside Iran itself, in Esfahan, very strong political views, and a very powerful young lady. I would recommend that everybody listen to this interview in full. It's about an hour long. It's at my YouTube, my Substack, all my various platforms. But I think she, more than any other, has clarified for me also exactly what is going on inside Iran. And I just wanted to play a very short clip of her response to me asking her to what extent is the West trying to direct what is going on in Iran.
It was very obvious that what we were saying online, especially on Twitter, was not reflective of what I was observing here and where I live at all. And to me, as someone who was pursuing that demand in my own ways, I saw an attack on the agency and credit of Iranian women because, you know, I mean, if I want the government to change something, I don't need to use hashtags in English, right? I
Yeah.
don't need to. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense, and I don't think that's something that has to do with anyone from outside. I've been obsessed with this quote from Malcolm X, because I think it resonates with how I feel. That where he says that during his famous speech, "The Bullet or the Ballot," that this is about our civil rights, and our brothers in Asia and in Africa and in Latin America have to stay silent about it. So this is exactly how I feel. Like, yes, we're forming movements, we're being active, and Iranian women are really powerful. You probably know well about it. It's like
Yeah.
57% of university students in Iran are women. Women are um, involved in different sectors of the society and the economy. And yes, there are inequalities, there are problems, we have issues with certain things, but we know how to deal with that. We have previously managed to change the law in favor of women by electing, for example, different parliament members, or by educating families and men, and there are female entrepreneurs, there are, you know, activists around the country, and they're doing their job, and suddenly you see protests, which I think they started as very legitimate, and I understand the anger. But soon the main purpose is lost, and it's very difficult to see what exactly is being demanded. You see a shift from slogans that were calling for more women rights into regime change, and it becomes at some point. I mean, right now we're seeing videos coming from even universities, of course via French, using like very vulgar, misogynic, sexist, so-called slogans, which comes from literally a rapist mentality. And it's very difficult to want to be a part of that. Like, that's something that everyone wants to reject. And
yeah, as I said, I 100% recommend that people listen to the whole interview. She clarifies everything, and what we're actually seeing now is so similar to what we saw in Syria in 2011. What's happening with these Western inflamed protests is, of course, it's opening the door to the terrorist infiltration. We've seen violence against security forces. We've seen security guards having their throats slit, being shot. Yesterday, I believe Mohammed Marandi put out a tweet about it today. And we saw what is claimed to be an ISIS attack on the Iranian shrine of Shah Shiraz in Shiraz 2 days ago. I think it was 2 days ago. 15 civilians killed, many of them children, and tens of people injured in this attack. One terrorist, ISIS took responsibility for this, but we have to understand that groups like MEK, Mujahideen Khalq, and ISIS are Western managed and Mossad managed. And so therefore what we're seeing is these protests being used as a battering ram to bring in the terrorist attacks in Iran, which I'm sure has nothing to do with Iran's solidarity with Russia and Ukraine. There's a short video of a little boy who lost his father, his mother, and his brother in these attacks.
تفنگ زده بودن؟ با کی اومده بودی زیارت؟ با منم بابام. خب داشتی چی کار میکردی این اتفاق افتاد؟ داشتیم رفتیم سوار ماشین شدیم تفنگ الان حالت خوبه خاله جان؟
So I think, what we have to remember exactly what happened in Syria. Please don't support Amnesty International, BBC, CNN, Western regime campaigns for women's rights. They have absolutely no connection to women's rights, and these governments have absolutely no consideration for women's rights or human rights, as has been demonstrated for decades. So I think listen to the Iranian voices just as we should have listened to the Syrian voices in 2011, and help them by lifting the sanctions. This is the strongest message that Setareh actually put across in her interview. How can women's rights progress if we are constantly under the economic savagery of the West? And of course, all of these Western-backed agents are calling for more sanctions against Iranian women in Iran.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for that. Now, if you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there, or you could pick something up at the UK column shop. But do share this program and anything else that you see from us on the various platforms.